Today is Tuesday, September 13th. This is a Prescott City Council voting meeting. Do we have any announcements or introductions today, Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, we just happen to have a few.
I'm shocked.
I know. I am pleased to join my fellow city council members in welcoming Connie Cantelmi. Connie was selected by council out of a pool of 25 candidates for this term, which will continue through November 2023. She was sworn in this morning prior to our executive session. Connie brings a wealth of experience to our city, as well as a demonstrated commitment to the citizens of Prescott. Welcome, Connie.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And moving on, thanks to some problem solving by our mayor, Phil Good, and city staff, I am pleased to provide an update on the city's decision to convert over 125 public parking spaces from 2-hour parking to free parking. So, the locals, tourists, and employees of downtown are encouraged to use these free spots so that you don't have to move your car every 2 hours. Over the summer, Public Works Department Traffic Engineer Ian Mattingly conducted public meetings and outreach with downtown business owners to hear their comments and concerns about the idea of converting over 130 2-hour parking spaces to free status. Based on staff planning and input from affected businesses, the city will convert 125 parking spaces to unrestricted status. With these changes and support demonstrated by the Prescott Downtown Partnership and the Chamber of Commerce, at the June 2022 public meeting, staff will begin the signing removals and modifications starting this week. So if you have any more questions, please call our outstanding PR guy, Mr. John Heine, at 928-777-1220 for more information. And thirdly, as you likely know, the City of Prescott is proposing a new airport vicinity overlay district in order to improve public safety. To help our residents understand what this AVO district is and what it will accomplish, the city has scheduled 4 open houses to provide more information and take your input. These meetings will take place at the airport terminal, and the dates are September 15th, 5 to 7, September 20th, 11 to 1, September 22nd, 10 to noon, and October 5th, 3 to 5. After these open houses are held, the Planning and Zoning Commission will continue a public hearing on Thursday, October 13th at 9 a.m. in council chambers. So, everybody, please show up and participate. We need your input. Thank you, and that's all for now.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. We'll now have an invocation from Father Emil Dunn at the All Saints Anglican Church, followed by a Pledge of Allegiance conducted by Councilman Tenney.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who has given us this beautiful town, we humbly beseech you that we always prove ourselves to be a people mindful of your favor, glad to do your will. Bless our town with honorable industry, sound learning, and pure manners. Save us from violence, discord, and confusion, from pride and arrogancy, and from every evil way. Defend our liberties and fashion us into a united people, that we may know you in all things. Endue these men and women with the spirit of wisdom to guide our town and govern us well, that there may be justice and peace in our city, and that through obedience to your law, we may show forth thy praise among the nations of the earth. In the time of prosperity, fill our hearts with thankfulness, and in the days of trouble, suffer us not to lose our trust in thee, which we ask through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mayor Good,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Rusing,
Here.
Councilwoman Cantami,
Here.
Councilman Montoya,
Here.
Councilman Moore,
Here.
Councilman Tenney,
Yes.
and the record will reflect that Councilman Ziska is excused from the meeting.
We now have a series of proclamations, starting with Suicide Prevention Month, followed by Constitution Week, then Empty Bowls Day, and finally International Day of Peace.
Is there anyone here from the public for Suicide Prevention Week? Please come up. Whereas suicide is a national public health challenge that causes immeasurable pain among individuals, families, and communities across the country. And as the number of veteran and military suicides has exceeded 6,000 each year from 2008 to 2017, and as suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, second for people ages 10 to 35, and on average, 129 Americans die by suicide each day, accounting for 47,000 suicide deaths in 2017. And on March 5, 2019, the President signed Executive Order 13861, calling for the development of a comprehensive plan to empower veterans and end suicide through coordinated suicide prevention efforts, prioritized research activities, and strengthened collaboration across the public and private sectors. This plan is now known as the President's Roadmap to Empower Veterans and End a National Tragedy of Suicide, or by the acronym PREVENTS. Whereas, for every individual who feels alone, ashamed, or believes that they will be a burden, or if their thoughts or feelings were shared, there are scores of others in every community who want to help but are not sure how. And whereas, as Prescott businesses are in the unique position to leverage the learnings from our employees, including veterans, to encourage a national discussion on mental health and well-being in the workplace and collaborate on meaningful solutions. And whereas the Department of Veterans Affairs has a governor's challenge to prevent suicide among service members, veterans, and their families that brings together interagency teams to address veteran suicide at the state level. And whereas the Prevents National Public Health Campaign, REACH, will seek to increase awareness of mental health issues and suicide prevention to reduce suicide for all Americans. Now, therefore, Phil Good, Mayor of the City of Prescott, does hereby proclaim the month of September as National Suicide Prevention Month. Here's the proclamation, and would you mind saying a few words?
Hi. My name is Karen White, and I'm a licensed social worker at the VA, and I am the suicide prevention case manager. So I work with veterans all day long to help them get through tough times. Most recently, just about a week ago, or actually September 3rd, we had our first inaugural motorcycle poker run, and we did that to educate on our SAVE program. So we educated veterans on how to talk to each other about suicide. And so S is for signs, and we taught them what the signs were. A is for asking the question. So if you see someone that have signs of being profoundly depressed and maybe suicidal, don't be afraid to ask the question. Are you having thoughts of suicide? And then be ready to validate their feelings and what we call do a warm handoff to a mental health professional. Don't just leave them there. And then encourage them. And so that at each stop at the American Legions, we did each letter, and they got a poker card. And they were given at the very end a prize for the highest card and highest hand and a prize for the lowest hand. And and they had the training and they enjoyed it. We had 61 veterans come on their motorcycles, and it was a 4-hour run, and it was very, very successful. So, I mean, we educate all day long on it, but this was a nice big event.
For all you do.
Also, to add thank you to Mayor Good. He was there for the event. He spoke at the event, being that he is also a veteran, so he and I very familiar with the unfortunate need for having training like this in our community with the number of veterans that we have, as well as first responders. So one of the things I just want to say, it is Suicide Prevention Month. Suicide prevention should be on everybody's mind, not just in September, but September is big, so we try to get the word out there. And there's a lot of myths about suicide that just talking about it puts the thought in somebody's head, and that's not how it works. If somebody's thinking about it, it's already there. So those questions, like Karen had mentioned, asking, it matters. I cannot tell you the number of veterans I personally have spoken to that are friends of mine that I served with, that I asked that question, and they don't hesitate to say, well, yeah, of course I thought about it. Don't you? Doesn't everybody? No, everybody doesn't. That means that maybe you need someone to talk to. So ask the question. Please ask. Let veterans know they're not alone. Whether it's somebody you serve with, someone that maybe you work with now, it doesn't matter. Please ask. Let them know you're not alone. Even though that conversation is difficult, imagine how it is for them every day of their lives. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure to present the proclamation for Constitution Week. I think we have a couple of representatives here that are looking forward to receiving this. Daughters of the American Revolution, and being a direct lineal descendant of Robert Good, who served in the Virginia militia as a second lieutenant during the Revolutionary War. I appreciate your support and ongoing recognition of the Constitution and the fight to create it. So I think everybody here will enjoy the fact there are only 3 whereases. Whereas September 17th, 2022 marks the 235th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas it is fitting and proper to officially recognize the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate this occasion, and whereas U.S. Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States designating September 17th through September 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, I, Phil Good, Mayor of the City of Prescott, Arizona, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through September 23rd, 2022 as Constitution Week. So there you go, Sally. You want to make some comments here?
Well, just a few, not many. Yeah, we are a member of the George W. Crook chapter here, and he was, of course, the gentleman that, the soldier that helped create the VA where it is now, and that was the first fort. Anyhow, we are the oldest in this county and chapter, and we're very happy to be part of it, and we're very proud of our ancestors that fought for our freedoms also. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Sally.
I'll just say one thing about it. So the Daughters of the American Revolution, back in 1955, they petitioned Congress to designate this week to honor and celebrate the Constitution. And Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the president at the time, he signed it into law on August 2nd in 1956. So ever since then, this week, the DAR makes a point of celebrating our Constitution, which I think we can all agree is one of the most important documents, if not the most important document that we have in this country. And so we appreciate the proclamation and the time to celebrate our Constitution with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's so cold. Hi, is there anyone here to receive the proclamation for empty bowls? Hi there.
It's a big crowd.
All right. Not to be outdone by the mayor, I have 4 whereases. Whereas, Empty Bowls has been a grassroots movement of artists in towns and cities around the world helping fund food banks in their local communities since 1990. And whereas, Prescott citizens have been supporting their own Empty Bowls movement since 1997. And whereas, Prescott Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, PUUF, and Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation, GPUUC, have been co-sponsors of this annual event. And whereas this year is the 25th anniversary of filling Empty Bowls. The silver anniversary of Prescott Empty Bowls will be held Sunday, September 18th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the Courthouse Square. Now, therefore, Phil Good, Mayor of the City of Prescott, does hereby recognize the 25th anniversary of Prescott Empty Bowls and proclaim that September 18th, 2022 is recognized as Prescott Empty Bowls Day. Would any of you like to say a few words?
I'm Kelsey Wilkes, and I am the chairperson this year, and I'm looking forward to you being there on Sunday. We will do a ceremony from the gazebo at 10:45, and so in addition to the proclamation, we also are doing a celebration for Prescott High School students, and so this black and white design was one of 72 art submissions from the high school art students to be this year's logo. So we will be recognizing Jay Robertson and the 3 other students, I have to stop saying that, I'm a grandma, the 3 other students that will be there on the Courthouse Square. And we also had silver sponsors this year. And so we're starting out with $6,350 in the coffers, which is very important to us. And we'll have lots of other fancy events, so please show up on Sunday for our event. The treasurer is too bashful to say that the money we raise goes to our Quad City food banks. We will have 14 restaurants that will be serving soup, and we will have bowls for sale for $20. And I do want to add, we often have people say, but I don't want to stand in that line. And so we remind people, and we'll remind them this year, of all the people in this city, in this county, who are less fortunate, who stand in line every day to get food at a food bank for their family or a soup kitchen for themselves. And we are privileged enough to buy a bowl and stand in line for an hour or two. And that's a way for us to remember folks out in the community that are less fortunate. No, I'm good. Okay. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite up participants here for the International Day of Peace Proclamation. Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Hi. Thank you for all being here today. Whereas the issue of peace embraces the deepest hopes of all peoples and remains humanity's guiding inspiration. And whereas the United Nations expanded the observance of the International Day of Peace in 2001 to include the call for a day of global ceasefire and nonviolence, and invited all nations and peoples to honor a cessation of hostilities for the duration of the day. And whereas there is growing support within our city for the observance of the International Day of Peace, which affirms a vision of our world at peace and fosters cooperation between individuals, organizations, and nations. And whereas global crises impel all citizens to work toward converting humanity's noblest aspirations for world peace into the practical reality of a culture of peace for future generations. Now, therefore, Phil Good, Mayor of the City of Prescott, does hereby proclaim September 21st, 2022 as International Day of Peace throughout the City of Prescott and urge its commemoration by individuals, organizations, places of worship, and schools. Would one of you like to speak?
I'm Mary Steenhoek, and I'm one of the founders of the Prescott Peace Builders. Our first International Day of Peace was 2016, and this year it'll be on that day, September 21, at the Plaza, and encourage you to come at 5:30 in the afternoon, a candlelight peace vigil. I want to thank 6:30. Oh yeah, you wouldn't. Mayor Good and the council for acknowledging the importance of this energy and desire and will and vision for peace. And this is an international one-day thing, but it is something that we hold in our hearts and in our community every day of the year and challenge you to do the same. Our mission is to encourage the people of Prescott to believe in and work for a more livable, peaceful future. So blessings to all of you and peace to all of us, and hope for peace in the future. Thank you. Right, yeah. Eric practiced because Eric will be reading it at our peace vigil. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you all. We'll move on to presentations. Arizona Department of Environmental Quality's Voluntary Environmental Stewardship Program Award for the Granite Creek Cleanup Project.
Good afternoon. I'm Morgan O'Connor with the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. Pleased to be here today to recognize a community event. It is the Granite Creek Cleanup. Prescott Creeks Preservation Association, the City of Prescott, and Yavapai County, over the course of many years, have cleaned up over 51.7 tons of trash and had over 7,045 community volunteers working together to achieve a common goal. And the state, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality wanted to recognize this. Supervisor Oberg had brought it to my attention some time ago, so we put it in the queue to be recognized. This is a copper level recognition. And I just want to say on behalf of my director, Misael Cabrera, thank you for your efforts to protect human health and the environment. Michael, would you like to say a few words?
I would, thank you. I'm Michael Bird. I'm the executive director from Prescott Creeks Preservation Association, and I'm pleased to be here to accept this recognition on behalf of both Prescott Creeks, the City of Prescott, Yavapai County, the many sponsors for the event, and those 7,000, it's even more than that because the event has been going on since the 1980s. Prescott Creeks has run the event since 2007. So we're pleased to be here, and if there's an opportunity to say a few words, I'd like to definitely recognize some of the key city staff and Yavapai County staff. In particular, Joe Baines, the Recreation Services Director, has knocked down a lot of roadblocks to make this event happen. Brady Higgs, the Solid Waste Superintendent. The city collects all the trash after volunteers have picked it up and gets it into its proper waste streams. So Brady's been a great resource for us. Kat Moody over at GIS has helped us with maps, those sorts of things. And Matt Killeen, the environmental coordinator, has also been very instrumental in helping this event go forward. Over the last 2 years, Yavapai County has come on, playing a key role of providing maps and guidance for participants. And we just really appreciate their help. So we've got a little graphic on the screen here that just kind of shows over the years that Prescott Creeks has been hosting the event, kind of the trend that we're seeing with both participation and trash collection. You know, as Morgan said, we've got over 51 tons worth of trash collected. But what we're seeing over time is there's less trash being collected and more people wanting to participate. So it took us a minute to wrap our heads around that, but that's a good problem to have. And so we're just really pleased that this event has been going on for as long as it has. And so then I just wanted to, I think our next slide is a quick save the date. We're already scheduled for the upcoming year in that should say 23, my apologies. But April 22, which is Earth Day. We have typically tried to pick the Saturday closest to Earth Day for the spirit of this event. Folks come out, do a couple hours of service, make the community better. So we really appreciate both the recognition and the support from our key partners at the city and Yavapai County. So thank you, and thank you.
Michael, I just wanted to say a special thank you to you. I know you've been so diligent and consistent over all these years, and to keep that Granite Creek corridor and the creek there so well maintained. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve.
Should have showed him that. That's a peace sign on it.
Oh, shit. Great.
All right, I will move on to the open call to the public.
Thank you, Mayor.
City Clerk.
City of Prescott welcomes public engagement, and residents may comment and address council regarding matters that are not included on the posted agenda during the call to the public. If you wish to speak, please complete a green speaker card and submit it to me prior to the meeting being convened. As a reminder, speakers are limited to 4 minutes, and the call to the public will be limited to 4 minutes in total. I do not have any green speaker cards at the moment. Is there anyone that wishes to address council? Okay.
Very good. So we will move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone on the council want to pull any items?
Well, surprisingly, yes.
Oh, Mayor Pro Tem.
I would like to pull the last item, item N, regarding the airport and possible land acquisitions.
Anyone else? No? Then I'll entertain a motion for the remaining items.
Mayor, I will move to approve consent items 9A through 9M.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
All right, item 9MN, then Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. The reason why I'm pulling this from the consent agenda is to have a general discussion as to what the purpose of this is, and also any item on the consent agenda that's in the six-figure range I usually like to pull. So with that in mind, I would appreciate it if our airport director, Dr. Robin Sabata, could tell the public what's going on.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council, Mayor Pro Tem as well. Michael, did you want to start, or?
If you want me to, or yeah, I could go ahead and start. This is land acquisition support services provided by Dibble Engineering, who's kind of been our airport engineer of record. How you doing, sir? For a variety of reasons, airport approach protection, potential borrow pit for the expansion of the runway, and some mapping discrepancies, we are interested in having some surveys done by certified surveyors of land in and around the airport in hopes of looking at potential properties that might make sense for possible appropriate land acquisition.
So on the board behind you, you can see that there's an updated airport layout plan. This was actually approved by the council back in April 12th, and then it was reported to the Federal Aviation Administration, and they also approved it. You can see that there are some possible land acquisitions that are shown up here in green, here in the approach area. But I'd like to make more detail to this, provide more detail. The survey that Michael is referring to is actually an appraisal that'll be conducted of these areas. So to kind of give you an idea what's going to happen, this is approach protection here in purple. And so this particular area will be acquired for what is initially called approach protection, but sometime in the future it could be used for a runway extension. This area right here in green, this parcel right here, is a parcel that is also being considered and appraised. This is a kind of a hilly area. It's a high area. And if anybody is aware of the fact that when you extend a runway and it's going downhill, we have to sort of flatten it out. So we do have to identify what's called the borrow source for that particular area. And the borrow source, or the fill for this particular runway extension, would likely come from this area. The next area that we're looking at is the area northwest of the airport. This area is an area, there was a discrepancy found in maps that were created in the 2009 Airport Master Plan. So the land use plan did identify some what we refer to as impact zones. While the table was correct in that document, Zone 2, an impact zone in that area, was apparently a discrepant. So this would be an additional acquisition associated with that. This area out here is also referred to as approach protection, and with a little bit here that would be specific to protecting the airline one engine inoperative splay. So all of these areas here that are shown on the airport layout plan in the purple, 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 and in the green are all eligible for FAA reimbursement. Because they are on the approved airport layout plan, they fall into the airport improvement program and could benefit from funds under the Airport and Airway Trust Fund, which incidentally is a user fund. This is more of a detail of the area at the approach end of runway 21 left, which would be where the extension area is. This is an area that is on the north edge of the airport, northwest, and it is an area that does have some floodplain, floodway impact, and that is the borrow source that we referred to.
And Robin, those are the parcels outlined in like a dark red, right?
Yeah, the red right there.
And the same for the map before?
That is correct. Here, I'll go back to it. It's this area right here. So this was part of the AED negotiations from last year, and this was an acquisition that was identified in the development agreement associated with that acquisition. And that acquisition needs to be completed from 2 years from the date that that particular agreement was signed. So there's the next one on the north side. This one is in the west, southwest area of the airport. Now the airport layout plan does show this area as the acquisition area. However, additional parcels are being considered associated with this area. The fact that they're on this map does not mean they'll be acquired. What it means is that there is consideration out there for the possibility of acquisition. That will be the decision of a council at a later date.
Robin, could you show us the where the mapping discrepancy was I just wanted to emphasize it was through no fault of the city. In fact, it was the city that discovered it, and it was actually one of our subcontractors that had made the error.
That is correct. What you just stated was all correct. This is that area. It's the northwest side of the airport, off the end of what is the crosswind runway right here. Originally, a zone here was drawn too short, and the proper zone has been depicted, cross-validated a number of times, so we're sure it's right. Just so you know, this is the city limits right here for the city of Prescott. Okay, and so inside this area is what we're looking at as possible acquisitions. You'll notice that this matches the airport layout plan update back here. That is this area right here. That is this area right here. So the way it's done with the FAA, when you do land acquisition that could have a valuation of over $500,000, you're required to have a master appraiser that helps set the scope. You have 2 regular appraisers minimum for over $500,000 in estimated land valuation. Those appraisers were vetted. It's not like they're walking around with a whole bunch of these type of credentials throughout the state. It's not easy to find these people. This is a very large project. Availability was challenging to find individuals who would be considered approved under the FAA requirements. We're very fortunate to have 2 appraisers, Appraisal Technology, which is Zach Sine, and Southwest Appraisal Associates, which is Stephen Cole, both well-respected and both familiar with aviation area appraisals. There's a master appraiser, Dennis Lopez, that's on the project. And additionally, there's environmental work that's being done. It's called a Phase 1 environmental. It's part of our due diligence to assure that there aren't, say, toxic chemicals or something on the site. That's what we have to do for the environmental due diligence. And of course, we have the leadership of Dibble providing project management, appraisal, services, and oversight and coordination, environmental coordination, updates to our airport layout plan and grant application services. This entire project will take about 18 months, but the first appraisals will start rolling in about 90 days. So we're going to start to see some things, but of course it's a longer process because eventually once it rolls in, we go through it, we review, then we start filling out the grant applications. And right now we have $3 million programmed in for next year for the first tranche of possible acquisitions, and hopefully we will be awarded those grants for this. The city share would be 2.5%, the state share would be 2.5%, and the federal share of the ALP-listed land would be 95%.
Thank you. And I just wanted to emphasize to everybody that we are working in good faith and in a timely manner to correct this error and do it because that's what we do. That's our obligation to the community.
And I also want to emphasize that this particular vote for the $331,542 is not including the appraisal. Dibble will be managing it, including project management, appraisal coordination, initial environmental assessments for Phase 1, plan and map updates, grant applications, and then a final closeout report.
Yes, sir.
All right, any other further comments or concerns? Any public comment?
No, Mayor.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move that we approve consent agenda item 9N, approval of city contract number 2022-168A7.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
Thank you very much. Now, we're moving on to consent ordinance.
Adoption of ordinance number 2022-1811, an ordinance of the mayor and council of the city of Prescott, Yavapai County, Arizona, approving a cellular site lease agreement, city contract number 2023-045 with T-Mobile West LLC, a Delaware limited liability company, for a wireless communications facility located on a part of city-owned real property at APN 105-07-001B, and authorizing the mayor and staff to execute any and all documents to effectuate said acceptance.
Do we have a presentation or a discussion on this item?
I have several questions, actually. I don't know if there's any. Oh, there's Don.
He moves slow.
He was hoping I didn't see him.
I was just here just in case you had any questions. I didn't expect any, but how may I answer your questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I just want the public to be aware that the city has many cell tower sites that we own throughout the community, and we have ground leases. And this one in particular is out by the transfer station.
The city's water facility on Sondag Ranch Road.
Yeah.
There's a 120-foot tower that's existed there for, 16 years.
It's a
on
big
that site.
girder.
It's a major tower. It's 120
girder.
feet tall. It was originally built by Altel.
Yeah.
About 16 years ago, and on there's 2 providers already, and this would be a third one co-located on that tower between the other 2.
And how much is our annual revenue on the ground lease?
For the ground lease on this particular one, it is $23,350 a year, and then we have built in 3% escalators every year. To keep up with inflation, hopefully. And we also have in there a $10,000 fee, which we consider the additional rent, which they pay within 90 days. And that kind of helps cover some of the other city costs as far as getting the lease to council and all of the stuff as far as the other facilities and things we have to do around the city to approve all their plans and stuff. And it also is kind of the buffer between when the lease is approved and when the lease is actually going into effect. Usually the leases go into effect when they start construction, and that takes some time for them to finish up their designs and get all the approvals and stuff they do. So it kind of gives some income during that time. This particular lease, it would, no matter what, it would start within a year of when it is approved.
So I'd like to focus on the ground lease. So it was, how many years is that? It was approved in 2016?
The lease is currently there?
The ground lease, not the sublease that we're talking about on the consent agenda.
Well, it's all city property. Altel built the original tower there in 2006.
2006?
Okay.
For 20, and they pay $23,000 a month? I mean, a year?
They do, as well as, also on that tower is AT&T. Yep. Altel became Verizon as part of the gobbling up of all the corporations. And then we also have AT&T on there. And now we're going to add a third one in between. Each of them are paying approximately the same amount around that $23,000 right now as time has moved along and the prices have increased.
So how many years is that, the original ground lease that was started in 2006? Is that a 20-year?
I believe they had an original 10-year lease, and then they had 3 5-year options. Most of them are around that time frame. It's something that's negotiable, but most of the leases end up being around at 20, 25 years total if all the options are executed. And that kind of helps them as far as all the infrastructure costs they have up front, because as you can imagine, it's a lot of money to build the tower and also the equipment that's on it and the ground equipment. So they got to recuperate that over a long period of time. Plus, it's good for all of the people who have cell phones in the area. They have a consistent source there, and as time goes along and the companies have a site there, they're always constantly improving their equipment as technology improves too. So it's a pretty good. It's a good revenue source for the city. Between the 11 leases we currently have, it's over $250,000 a year that we're getting in rent. So
Do we negotiate any public safety communications up there on those towers?
This particular one, we negotiated that when Altel built the original tower, that the very top portion of it would be set aside for city use. It could be for emergency services or whatever services the city felt. And that's pretty much the case on most of them, that we have a site that's designated the city can also be on those towers.
When these leases become ready for renewal, do we run them through our legal department, or is it just approved administratively by you in the real estate department, or?
The way the leases are written, the renewals are automatically renewed at the end of the original term. Let's say the first term is for 10 years, then they have like 3 5-year additions that they can do. If they do not notify us within 12 months of the end of that particular term that they want to terminate the lease, it is automatically renewed for the next term.
Because it seems like a pretty good deal, because I remember when I was looking at cell towers back in the 90s, they averaged $20,000 a year. And so here we are in 2022, $23,000 a year. It seems like we could negotiate a much better lease, or do some cost comparisons and see what the market rate is, because these seem like pretty
I was actually involved in
rates.
a statewide cell site lease comparison for pricing for the entire state a year ago. This was actually done through Arizona State University. They were doing a study on it. And the city of Prescott's lease rates are some of the highest in the entire state. We're higher than Scottsdale, Phoenix, Glendale. I mean, almost all of the major cities in the state, our prices are actually higher than those.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And it does sound like it's a good revenue source. We get $225,000 a year.
Yeah, and just on this one particular tower, we're going to get like $75,000 a year in revenue just off this one tower.
Yeah.
And there's more coming online all the time as the areas need more, and if reception is needed in other areas and the providers find new areas they need to, they do it. So it's a good win-win for everybody.
Thank you. We all like our cell towers and our cell phones.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, and I just want to emphasize this is a co-location, so we're just adding one more provider to a currently existing tower, and we're not adding any few additional towers.
Correct.
Thank you, Don. So I'll entertain a motion.
Thank you.
I move to adopt consent ordinance item 10A.
Second.
Motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
All right, we're moving on to regular agenda item A.
Discussion and possible action regarding retaining the law firms of Barron and Budd PC, Cossett, Sumich, Parasola, and Taylor LLC, and the law office of Joseph C. Tan P. LLC to represent the city in pursuing litigation regarding damages due to PFAS and PFOS.
City Attorney, do you want to enlighten us to this item?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, in terms of a lot of this relates to strategy and litigation, which obviously was addressed in executive session. We can't get into that here. But it is up for a vote before the council today on whether to approve hiring these attorneys to represent us. They are in leadership in the currently existing MDL, that's multi-district litigation, in which litigation is proceeding basically across the United States against certain manufacturers of these forever chemicals due to information that these companies had but ignored, and the profits that they made off of it, and then the damages that occurred to the various cities and water providers. And in our case, that would include wells that have tested positive and our mediation efforts on that.
So both current and future costs to be able to remediate, identify, remove, and dispose of these potential contaminants.
That is correct.
So I do want to emphasize that we were approached by this group primarily because one of the attorneys that is part of this group in the Phoenix area was pretty familiar with what we were dealing with, some of the public media reports that we've been trying to make sure the community understands what we're dealing with, and I think this is a valuable way to at least potentially provide some revenue that would allow us to do our best to make sure these contaminants are reduced to the lowest level possible.
And not that it matters to the determination whether to hire them. They are experts in the field. They've reviewed mediation efforts or remediation efforts throughout the United States. And they did comment as to our approach in response to the testing positive that is basically best practice, that we've kind of went above and beyond what we need to do in trying to protect the public and also continue providing water.
Excellent, thanks. Mayor Pro Tem.
So this is like a class action lawsuit?
It's not a class action. It's what's called multi-district litigation. So there are water providers throughout the state or throughout the states, the country, suing. And because there's so many of them, they get brought into one, essentially one courthouse. But it's not a class action where all plaintiffs are joined together. Rather, a judge becomes an expert on this type of litigation and directs which cases go first, second, and so forth. So it's not a class action, but it is a MDL or multi-district litigation.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any public comment?
No, Mayor.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve retaining the following law firms related to PFAS and PFAS damages. 1, Barron and Bud PC. 2, Cossack, Summit, I'm not sure I'm saying these names
Parcillo.
correctly. Parcillo and Taylor LLC, and Law Office of Joseph C. Tan PLLC.
Second.
Having a motion and a second, please vote.
Passes 6-0.
All right, moving on to item B.
Approval of city contract number 2023-032 with Southwest Slurry, Inc. for the fiscal year 23 pavement preservation micro seal project.
No, that needs to go out of the way, right? That's what I was looking for. No, it's should be a map. Should be Adobe. No. I'll be right with you. I do not see it here. Calvary Church Seventh-day Appraisals. It's not there. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Tim Sherwood, Public Works. I don't see the map loaded here, so I will describe to you roughly the areas that we're working in. The item I have for you today is the FY23 Pavement Preservation Micro Seal Project. The areas we're working in will be in North Prescott around Montana Drive and Trail Walk, Gail Gardner Road between Iron Springs and Gurley, Sierra Peaks, and Copper Basin Road from White Spar to the city limits, as well as the Rancho Vista subdivision and the Sierra Vista subdivision off Copper Basin Road. This project is included in the city's pavement management program. Microseal is a mixture of emulsified asphalt and crushed aggregates. It's a very cost-effective preservation method that we use to extend roadway service life. Increases stability. It will fill minor ruts and voids in the surface of the asphalt and surface irregularities. IMS and field investigations determined the selected roadways for this project. The average PCI and roadway classifications for this were 59 for locals, 60 for minor collectors, and 74 for major collectors. We're not doing any arterials as part of this project. It constitutes 27 lane miles total for the entirety of the project. This technique, through IMS data and stuff, will reset these roads to a 92 as soon as we're completed. So we get a good bang for the buck here. The city will be using a standard cooperative use contract through Maricopa County and Southwest Slurry. Funding for the project is budgeted in FY23 and available in the streets funds. And with that, I will be happy to answer any of your questions.
Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Tim. I just have a question. How do citizens in our community know when maybe their street might be on for next year or the next year? Just because I frequently get constituents that ask about the road they live on, and I'm really happy that we're being able to do these 27 miles, lanes for the residents. But there are other residents that would like their streets done. So how do they find out if their streets are in the queue?
The best way would be to contact us at Public Works.
Okay.
And between myself and my capital project manager who's in charge of the pavement program, that is going to be the quickest way for us to identify that. And a lot of times, especially local roads, somebody will bring a local road to our attention that may not be programmed for a couple years down the road. We'll go out and physically look at the road and determine that it may need to get bumped up because it's just beyond anything that our streets department can do as far as repairs go. So we'll move it up in the queue as often as we can. But I would say the best way is to contact us at Public Works.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know, Tim, that your primary focus is to try to identify a number of streets or roads within a concentrated area so that you can have more economies of scale or economies of linear foot while you're doing all that together. But sometimes you'll end up with a small street that in such horrible shape that sometimes we have to do a little one-offs from time to time to be able to make sure that they stay reasonably safe.
I have a question.
Mayor Pro Tem.
So this program is designed to extend the life of the pavement. About how many more years do you think we'll get out of these roads?
If it's a totality of everything we do. There's several preservation treatments that you want to try and do in the first 10 to 15 years. And then there's more aggressive treatments that you do. Something like this, we do a surface treatment. It will not prevent cracks from showing up in the asphalt, so we'll continue to crack seal it. So we'll continue these pavement preservation techniques with the hope that we get the 20-year lifespan we want to see out of our roadways.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2023-032.
Second.
Motion is second. Do we have any public comment on this?
We did not, Mayor.
Very good. Motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 6-0.
All right, we're moving on to item 11C then.
Approval of multiple contracts for the Street Division Snow Equipment Facility as follows. Number 1, city contract number 2023-026 with Jansen Construction LLC for the construction of the Streets Division Snow Equipment Facility. And number 2, city contract number 2022-082A2, an amendment to city contract number 2022-082 with Kimley Horn for post-design services.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Janet Ramsey, Public Works, and I have with me here today Brian Scott, also Public Works, Street Maintenance. In this particular case, I think co-conspirator as well. We're here today to present to you the city's Streets Division Snow Equipment Facility. The street maintenance operation is in a phased process of moving from the north side of Prescott Lakes Parkway to the south side as the wastewater treatment plant moves its operations to the airport location. This process will help to meet some of the space and logistics needs of both operations and facilitate proper storage, access, and use of some of our city's most valuable pieces of equipment. In this phase, construction of the snow equipment facility will address a serious safety issue related to outfitting snow response equipment, will support the needs of our citizens with the ability to provide more efficient service, and will provide some much-needed cover to extend the functional life of some of our most expensive equipment. In the first phase of the facility, a project which was approved by Council on May 11/21, the sludge ponds depicted here, I think, oh, my cursor's not on here.
Just keep going up. Keep going up. Keep, now you're on.
There you are.
There we go. Look, first timer here. So anyway, in May 11, 2021, the 4 sludge ponds depicted right here were approved for demolition, and the site was prepared for utilization for this project. The site was prepared, I'm told, in totality, with inert materials supplied by the Public Works Department. Okay. In snow events, citizens and visitors and first responders rely on the city to clear the roads for safe travels. It's been a little warm. It's rainy today, but you probably remember this. This was just back in January of 2021. On that day, the response was as follows: 5 days of 24-hour plowing operations, over 22,000 miles traveled by plow equipment, nearly 3,500 snow-related telephone calls, 616 truckloads of snow removed from the downtown area, and just a little under $49,000 expended on this snow removal.
And I do want to mention that I got my snow blower fixed and prepared for the winter. I picked it up yesterday.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll assume that that's like the groundhog seeing his shadow. Maybe we should be prepared. So everybody understands that we don't have snowplows just standing around waiting for Prescott snow days. These are the workhorses of our force, and they have to be converted from their primary functions to their snow response gear. This facility is correctly sized for our current needs, and now those needs are indicated on this slide here. You'll see that we have approximately 6 F-550 trucks, 6 10-wheel dump trucks, 1 6-wheel dump truck, an F-350, an F-250, a road grader, a backhoe, a loader, and if necessary, we can commandeer some of these other equipment that is on the lower left there, including backhoes, 10-wheel dump trucks, skid steers, F-350, and a road grader. The city's snow equipment facility stands in poor condition that threatens to give way under the elements. This facility was homemade, relocated at least once, and extended to meet the operational needs of the defendant, or the, excuse me, the division. The division. That was for you, Brian.
A Freudian slip.
Sometimes I feel like a defendant.
That was for you. While we applaud the ingenuity of the team, the elements have taken a significant toll, and the existing facility has exceeded its functional life. Further, it lacks much-needed safety features. Currently, our operators must climb on and off and balance on the truck to guide the spreader equipment in and out and hook and unhook the suspension chains that support the spreader equipment. I'm going to try to get here where I can show you. I have a video. Can you? Okay, got it. All right. So we have a video, and while I run the video, I would ask Brian to explain what the operators are doing in this particular case. All right, there we go.
So this is kind of after the fact, after the spreader has been lowered into the 10-wheel dump truck. To load the spreader into the 10-wheel dump truck is exactly the opposite. The operator has to climb up the truck onto the top of the spreader in order to release the chains that actually physically hold the spreader to the rack system. And then, of course, he has to crawl back down that truck to exit the truck, and then the spreader can be cinched, as it were, down to the truck to be held in place during operations.
So instead, this is what we'd like to construct. A new facility is a safety and service priority of the department. In the proposed facility, operators will conduct this setup from the safety of covered catwalks under a lighted canopy. In addition to protecting our team, the facility will also provide shelter from the elements for our very expensive and critical snow response equipment. This facility is actually at ADOT, but it's very similar to the one that we have proposed. The one that we have proposed has 11 stalls back to back, whereas this one is aligned in a straight row, but it's very similar. And this is just another view of our existing facility, and it's in contrast to the proposed facility presented for your consideration today. I do want to mention that you may have noted in the engineer's estimate in this case, it was $2.1 million, while the low bid was $2.4 million. This is not really unexpected in the current market, of course, and considering the volatility of the primary construction materials for this facility, concrete and steel, it's not that shocking. But I will tell you that in this particular case, I really drilled down to the math, and I understand that it's something that's even more volatile that really caused the discrepancy in this case, and that was labor. We're finding that contractors can and will and in fact must pay whatever it takes to get laborers on the site to do these kinds of construction projects for us. That again said, this is a high priority for the department. Funds are available in the Streets Fund. And one final look at the current versus the proposed. Oops, excuse me, I'm sorry. And with that, I will entertain any questions.
Mayor Pro Tem. Excuse me.
Thank you. Of course, I call this the snowplow barn. And there's no doubt in our minds that this is well needed. It will extend the life of the equipment and promote a safer working environment outside of the elements, because I believe you have to take the snowplow apparatus off and on and hang it up. But my question is, how many square feet is this facility going to be? All I see is a footprint here.
Okay.
I was trying to figure out cost per square foot.
So we're about, for this rack system facility, this first part of that is 165 feet long by 55 feet wide. Can't do that math that fast in my head, but that's the footprint of the spreader rack system that will support the spreaders when they're not in use.
Because I was just trying to calculate how many square feet we're looking at and what a cost per square feet was going to be, because I see it's 130% over budget. There's a $1.4 million,
That's your square footage.
9,000 square feet.
9,075.
And there's a $1.4 million budget shortfall, and it's going to affect our pavement preservation projects, because that's where the money's going to be coming from, out of the street funds.
Mayor Pro Tem, that is correct. Again, I do believe that this is a priority because of the safety issue. That said, we have spoken with the pavement management team, and we believe that we'll be able to time certain projects, assist with the street maintenance group, and we'll be able to pay for this without too much impact on the pavement management program itself.
Well, what I'm getting into is, there's those pre-designed, prefabricated steel buildings. Did we look into those as far as having those designed for this project? Because they are a lot cheaper than something custom-made.
To be clear, Mayor Pro Tem, this facility itself is not completely enclosed. So in fact, if I can get back to the, trying to find my cursor again. There we go. So it looks like this facility at ADOT. It's not completely enclosed. That is potentially a future plan, but that's not the plan for this initial project. This initial project just includes the structure itself and then the covering, so that it will be covered and they can provide the lighting and the hoists on the steel structure.
So with all the other costs added in, it's going to be like $2.7 million, and then there's a cost of the slab, additionally, a slab to, you know how much?
The slab is included.
Oh, the slab
as well
was-
as utilities.
was
There's-
included.
There's gas, water, and sewer
Yeah.
that are a part of this same
Yeah.
project for that total number.
Because there was I was just made aware of how cheap these steel buildings are. You can get a massive steel building for under $1 million.
I believe, Mayor Pro Tem, that it would require this rack system in order to
Customization.
to support the weight of the spreaders. The large truck spreaders are approximately 1,800 pounds apiece empty. The small truck spreaders are a little over 1,000 pounds empty. So it requires quite a structure to support and hold those, particularly when they're outside in the elements like this. They're subject to wind and all the different things that can move these structures around.
So it looks like a pulley system, it looks like.
Not necessarily. I mean, the hoists are in the rear of this new setup just to lift the back end of that spreader off of the truck. The front end of that spreader is actually lifted up and attached to chains with using the dump truck itself. But it would, regardless of a steel building, require a system like this to be engineered to hold the weights, the movement of the spreaders in the wind and things like that. This is what engineering tells us it should be.
Okay, thank you. I just had a few questions, and I wanted to put my mind at ease. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'll add something real quick, too. When we first started the design on this, we looked at a lot of different facilities, and there was a set of plans that ADOT had done, but they were proprietary to the engineer. This is not there's not a one-size-fits-all for these things, and there's no really off-the-shelf facility like this that you can find.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilman Tenney.
I just want to tell you, I appreciate all the thought and effort that's gone into bringing this to this point. I remember giving initial approval for you moving forward for this a little over a year ago, and it was based, as a lot of our conversations are based on what's safe for the public and particularly what's safe for our city employees. We really appreciate you taking those things into account, plus obviously the prolonging the life of our equipment. And there absolutely is a major initial upfront investment, but it's better than being nickel and dimed to death on equipment aging out prematurely or lawsuits, and then the 5,000 plus phone calls we get when we're not ready to go with snow. So, or even when we are ready to go with snow.
Yeah. Councilwoman Cantelmi.
If that's a mouthful, you can change that to something else. Councilman.
Councilwoman.
I had a couple of questions, just because I'm a budget and finance person here. What are you going to do with all that extra steel? Will you be able to scrap that and get some money from it? The old structures?
It would likely go to scrap, yes. And that would probably be facilitated through our solid waste division.
Yeah, because
it's literally constructed of old light poles.
Oh, okay.
As Janet said, it was originally constructed at Virginia Street, where Public Works, or actually Fleet Maintenance, is at now. It was dismantled when Street Maintenance moved out to Sundog Ranch Road and rebuilt and added on to, as well as our fleet grew, of course. So I wouldn't want to build anything out of it, so we'll be having discussions with solid waste and probably going that route with it.
See if they can take it somewhere and weigh it and maybe give us some money back.
Yes. Yes.
Another question is, the cost overruns, I'm assuming, are just because of the cost of all the building materials have gone up so much? And is the contract an escalating bid, or is it a set bid?
Yeah, it's a firm bid. The contractor will do the work for the price bid.
Okay.
There's always the chance or something that it gets missed and something comes up during the course of the contract, but we also build allowances into our contracts to help cover most of those.
For the overruns? Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or concerns? Do we have any public comment?
No, Mayor.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2023-026.
Second.
Motion and a second, please vote.
Passes 6-0.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2022-08242.
Second.
Motion is second, please vote.
Passes 6-0.
Good, we'll move on to item 11D.
That's all right. Approval of multiple contracts for the Juniper and Karen Drives water main replacement project as follows. Number 1, city contract number 2023-027 with Asphalt Paving and Supply, Inc. And number 2, city contract number 2018-118A5, an amendment to city contract number 2018-118 with Shepherd Westnitzer, Inc. for post-design services.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Gwen Rowich, Deputy Director of Public Works. This is not a new item. We discussed it at the last council meeting, and council had a lot of questions. So I'm not going to go through the presentation because Tim did that at the last meeting, but he is here to answer questions as we go along. I just put a few bullet points together because there were so many questions. When I went back and watched the video of the last meeting, I failed to realize just how many questions you asked, so I apologize you didn't get this in writing in advance, but these are your questions that you asked, and I want to make sure that I answer all of them so that we all have a good understanding of what we're doing here. So the first thing that I would say to you is that the city of Prescott and the council in particular is not just a council person, but we operate a municipal utility system. And when we do improvements to that municipal utility system, we're subject to the same responsibilities, rules, and regulations as any other franchise utility, like APS, Unisource Gas, CenturyLink. We, in effect, are operating as a public utility system. So in the context of me answering your questions, I want you to kind of keep your municipal utility provider hat on, if you will. Thank you much. So in that context, whether a customer of our utility is in the city or the county is irrelevant. They are a customer of our public utility, and they have the same expectation and of the level of customer service that we provide to anyone, whether they're in the city or in the county. The Karen Juniper Water Main Project, when they built that subdivision, they actually platted it in 1950, but they didn't build the water mains until 1962, and phase 2 of it was built in 1968. So those water mains were built a long time ago, but subdivision rules even at that time were the same. Once you build the infrastructure, you dedicate it to the public, it's public infrastructure, and the city accepts it for maintenance, that it met the criteria or the standards that were in place at the time that it was built. And the city accepted it for maintenance, long-term maintenance, for the life of that infrastructure. This also includes replacing the infrastructure when it reaches the end of its useful life, as the city collects rates and fees from those customers over the life of that infrastructure. I did look into the Karen Juniper area water mains. The city has never done any upgrades to the system, but we have maintained the system over time. And as Tim mentioned in his presentation, we do have a lot of maintenance issues that come up or have come up in recent years for this project. And as I go on, I'll explain to you how we have prioritized projects. I will remind you that in the presentation, we shared with you that there is no sewer in the Karen Juniper area. We did look at possibly putting in sewer. As part of the previous mayor's sewer commission, we did identify this area as not having sewer, but the cost to put sewer in this particular neighborhood was the most expensive retrofit of all the areas that we identified, primarily because there are only 39 property owners on these two streets. And it was an almost $2 million cost just to put in the public part of the infrastructure that would be needed for sewer. So when staff was designing this project, the decision was made that sewer was cost prohibitive because we cannot gift the sewer to those property owners. If we decided to put in sewer, those property owners would have to pay for that infrastructure, just like anyone else in any other subdivision. One of the other questions that was asked was whether the city is obligated to continue to provide water service. And I believe that City Attorney Joe Young provided an answer to you in writing, but he referenced Arizona Revised Statutes 9-516C, which does require a utility provider to continue to provide service once service has been established. Let me see if I can, sorry. Touchy mouse. Okay, so we also had a lot of questions about outside the city water rates, right? The city code says that if you're outside the city limits, you pay a 30% upcharge for your water. Not just the water that you use, but the base rate, the water protection aquifer, yes.
When was that initiated?
The 30% fee. So I did do a little bit of research on that, and Mark can correct me if I'm wrong. Let me get my notes here.
Says right there, 1986.
It's varied over time. I can tell you that in 1980, folks outside the city limits paid a $10.40 base rate, and folks inside the city paid $6.20. So it started as early as the 1980s. But in 1995, in the city's water rate study, we identified a 40% upcharge for anyone outside the city limits. And then in 1998, when we made agreement with the Chino Valley Irrigation District, we agreed not to exceed a 30% upcharge to folks in Chino Valley. And currently today, we exercise a 30% upcharge for anyone, regardless of whether they're in Chino, outside the city limits. So it's been in effect for decades, but it's changed. The amount has changed over time. Am I on track with that?
Yeah, absolutely, Gwen. Mark Woodfill, Budget and Finance Director. It has been various things. In the 80s, when it was first put in place, it was 100% upcharge. Everybody outside paid double what you paid in the city. That went on until the early 90s when we were sued, or a claim threatened by the people outside the city that was arbitrary, if you will, and it was at the time. So we had to go through a rate study to substantiate the upcharge, and the upcharge is related to the additional infrastructure needed to serve outside, but it's also associated with the fact that customers outside the city are not citizens of the city, so they do not have the ownership liability that all of us as citizens do have. So there's additional payment that they make on that. And again, this is something we look at every rate study we do, what upcharge can be substantiated. And that's how we got to where we are today.
So the other thing that the 30% upcharge does is it encourages conservation for septic system users. And a lot, but not all, but many of the homes outside the city limits are not on city sewer. We were able to find Arizona Revised Statutes 9-511, which allows the city to engage in businesses of public nature and establish outside of city limits water rates in an amount not to exceed a 30% surcharge. So even in statute, we have the right to charge the 30% upcharge. And we do that, as Mark indicated, to help offset costs to the water ratepayers. It benefits all the ratepayers because remember, we're one utility. So those folks that are paying a little bit more may be offsetting some of the costs for the folks that are not paying the upcharge.
So Gwen, is that a cap?
The 30% by statute, I believe it is.
It is?
Not necessarily and not entirely. I will say there is litigation ongoing in Tucson where they had variable interest rates and one of their surcharge, or not interest rates, but variable surcharges, one of which was up to, I think, 40%. The county of Pima has sued the city of Tucson because for two reasons. One is that it's up to 40%. The other is Tucson is not charging a surcharge for water given under an IGA to surrounding towns and cities, but they are doing that surcharge to unincorporated areas. And so the basis of the lawsuit is that these variable rates, variable surcharges, are not just, and the requirements for these rates under the rate studies that they be just and reasonable and that they not be discriminatory. And so it's tough to show those things, and it can't be showed without a rate study. But even with a rate study, if there's going to be variable surcharges, it's pretty difficult to show that it's not discriminatory. And right now, we're going to see, based out of this Tucson and versus Pima case, whether it's even lawful at all to have a variable surcharge. Sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Lawyer.
Well, I'd just like to say I'm glad we're having this conversation because we have very many old, aging neighborhoods out in the county that we provide water to. Mountain Club, Hokagan, up off Copper Basin, High Valley Ranch, and many more. And we have like lane miles of these aging water mains, and I'm concerned that this 30% surcharge that we have started charging back in the 80s, you know, if we could just break even on the costs in replacing these mains, I'd be happy, but I'm afraid we're not even breaking, not even going to be breaking even.
So if I could keep going through the bullet points, I think I can answer that for
Okay,
you.
thank you.
So the question of who's responsible to restore the roadway came up in our conversation. In city code, the utility provider is required to restore the street to the same or better condition than before they went in to place the utility. Not only is it in the general engineering standards, but it's also in our standard detail 200Q. The county has similar code. In addition to that, it's called out in Arizona Revised Statutes that when a utility provider comes in, they're required to restore the street to the same or better condition. And likewise, the county has a standard detail Y200-1 that basically shows a contractor what they have to do to restore the trench, and then they have to restore the street to its condition. I will say that the roadway repairs for Karen and Juniper will come from the water fund. They will not come from the street fund, because they are directly attributed to the water project, and therefore they come from the water fund. And the water ratepayers will pay for the restoration of the street as part of this project. This is a picture of Karen Drive. You see this blue dash down the center? That's the blue stake for the water main. This is a very narrow street. In terms of a typical street, it would be approximately 28 feet of pavement. This street is 22 to 24 feet, and as it continues toward the west, it gets substantially narrower. It's almost like a lane. So by the time the city comes in and replaces the water main, there will be very little street surface left. That said, staff did call Dan Cherry at Yavapai County. We spoke with him about this project and asked them how the county might assist us in providing some relief. While they can't or won't entertain giving us hard dollars, they did modify some of their requirements for restoration of the street, not only the surface of Karen and Juniper, but also the resurfacing of Senator Highway, where we will also be trenching. Those cost savings are as much as $160,000 to the city by having these modified street restoration standards that were approved by the county. That came over in a letter that I asked Sarah to pass to the council last week, a letter of intent from the staff. Their staff and our staff are actively working on an intergovernmental agreement right now. The county is seeking the city's assistance in repairing what you see here on the screen. This is a drainage structure that's at the end of Karen Drive. They had that programmed in their CIP for this year, and so they've asked us to collaborate because we will have a contractor actively out there on the site much faster than they could. If they come after us, they'll tear out the pavement, the chip seal that we're going to put in to put this improvement in and then put it back. So this forthcoming IGA will include the city's contractor potentially putting in the drainage infrastructure that the county is designing, as well as the county paying for the paving or the restoration of the street here in the area of the drainage improvement. So right here on this map, this is Senator Highway over here on the right, and this is Karen Drive. At the end of Karen Drive, this is where the drainage infrastructure and the paving will take place.
Councilwoman Cantelmi, you had a question?
I was back on another subject. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Was just wondering, has the city ever done a cost analysis on where we are to date on the repairs and somebody referred to them as the Band-Aids we've been putting on that road system for so many years and the money collected over the years? I mean, is it even at 30% higher water taxing or charging to that community of 39 people? Has anybody pulled any numbers on that? I mean, it's been since 1980 something?
So I haven't quite got to that part of the bullet points, but if you'd like, I can jump in.
No, that's fine. We can wait. Just had a question about that. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions about the drainage improvements? Regardless of whether we enter into an IGA with the county or not, the project with the current bidder can proceed and should proceed because we can only guarantee the bid for a certain number of days, and that time frame is running out. If we do not enter into an IGA, the city will simply go in, replace its water mains, restore the street to the condition that the county has agreed to, and we're done. If we do enter into an IGA, then the county will reimburse us for this part of the pavement restoration as well as the drainage infrastructure. So that shouldn't be a factor in whether or not you decide to move forward with the contract with AP&S. Are there any questions about that part?
So the county is planning on doing this drainage project, and they're prepared to pay for the drainage project.
Yes.
So they're proposing that we combine our project with the drainage project, and they'll reimburse us for the full cost of the drainage project, and that way there isn't a second requirement for pavement restoration.
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay.
And it also will be less inconvenience to the residents in this area. We'll be in there once and out, and it won't have the county following behind us.
That makes sense.
So how are projects prioritized? That question came up a couple of weeks ago. The city has a water and wastewater master plan. It's a 20-year plan. We hire Carollo engineers. They come in, they update our hydraulic model. We have a hydraulic model that is a simulation of the physical system out in the field. The model identifies not only deficiencies, but also age and condition projects. Whenever we have deficiencies, that is attributed to new growth and will result in an impact fee for new growth. Age and condition projects are related to existing customers, and those are paid for by the ratepayers. The Small Water Mains Replacement Program is a standing item in our 5 to 20-year master plan that we put together. Every year, we do small water mains replacements. We may not do construction every year, but we're either designing or we're constructing every year to replace aged infrastructure in our water and wastewater systems. We currently have almost 18 miles of small water mains in the county alone that still need to be replaced, and yet this project rose to the top of the list, not only because of its age, but because of the high amount of maintenance cost for the system, as well as I think Tim showed you in his last presentation, I'll call it a tank, but I don't think that's really what it is. We call it a beer can, but it's just a very small, little, tiny water tank that is perched on the side of a hill. It's very difficult for staff to get to. It's over 60 years old. This infrastructure is at the end of its useful life. So when we go in and we do this project on Karen Juniper, we will not only improve the deficiency, which is the fact that there are no fire hydrants on this street, but we will also replace the aged infrastructure because of its current condition and the amount of money we are spending to maintain it. Are there any questions about that? Okay. So there were also some questions that came up about private water systems behind the master meter. Mountain Club is served by a master meter, and all of the mains inside of Mountain Club are private. All the water lines are all private. The city will never replace the lines inside of Mountain Club. There are many other subdivisions, but Mountain Club was specifically brought up in the last meeting, so we looked into that. There are many, many examples of this in the city. The Veterans Administration, Embry-Riddle, tribal lands, and many subdivisions, townhomes or condos often have master meters, and everything on the back side of that meter is private. The city is not responsible to maintain that or replace that at any time. The issue of the buttermilk area also came up in our last discussion. The buttermilk area has a single 6-inch water main that comes into a very, very large area. City code requires that every property front the water main in order to get service. Unfortunately, when those folks came and asked for water service, it was for a main that did not exist. Again, the gifting clause comes into play here. Anyone that wants water service has to extend the main or be in a development where a main already exists. So in the buttermilk question, it wasn't a matter of replacing an existing main. There is no main on buttermilk for most of those property owners up there. So a council person can tell me the 30% upcharge is not calculated over time to pay for a specific neighborhood. When we develop the master plan and we identify projects that are related to growth and we identify projects that are related to existing ratepayers, those projects are identified in either the infrastructure improvement plan, or we call it the IIP, or the capital improvement plan, the CIP. Those costs are put into the rate study that we do every 5 years. Every 5 years, We review the rates, we analyze the rates, and unfortunately, we almost always increase the rates to pay for the cost of the improvements that are identified in our short and long-range master plan. So we don't necessarily track how much income came in through a neighborhood over 20 or 30 years. In this case, it was 60 years. But we plan as the fiduciary of the utility for the improvements that are identified and needed and planned for. And we do that every 5 years. We look at what do we need, and then we plan fiscally for that. I can tell you that we are almost at the conclusion of the development of the IIP and the CIP for the next 5, 10, 15, and 20-year period. And then we will begin the next rate study because we're almost at the 5-year mark. So that is how we ensure that we have the monies that we need for replacement of aged infrastructure over time. We have limited resources as well in terms of staffing and engineering firms available to do work and such. So that's why the small water mains projects or program is an ongoing program. And we just put a certain amount of dollars into the IIP and the CIP, as well as the annual budget every year to make sure that we're nipping away at these small, undersized infrastructure or infrastructure that have reached the end of their useful life. I hope I answered your question. Actually, I hope I answered all of your questions. There were a lot of them.
Very thorough. Great.
Please let me know if there's anything else I can tell you, or if you'd like Tim to come back up and talk about the project. But as I mentioned, we're almost at the end of our 60-day guaranteed bid price for this project. So we'll either need approval of this project today, or we'll have to rebid it at some future date.
Let's move forward. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Gwen. That was very comprehensive, and it gave us a lot of insights as to where we are with our water infrastructure. One thing we have to realize is the fact that there are no fire hydrants out there. That's the way they did it back then, but nowadays, getting some fire hydrants out there, I think, is extremely crucial because it is in an area where a potential fire could come in from the southwest. And to have some fire hydrants out there would actually be a benefit to that whole part of the town. And I also want to make sure everyone's aware of the news. Jackson, Mississippi, which is a capital city, has had a catastrophic failure in their water infrastructure for whatever reasons. And we just have to thank you for keeping up with our water infrastructure to make sure we have plentiful, clean, potable water available 24/7. Thank you.
Our number one priority, clean, safe water.
Well, as a utility provider, we're obligated to continue to provide that service. And the rate studies will indicate whether we can continue to afford the upgrades that we're obligated to provide. So I guess the moral here is that we have to be very careful about extending water service outside city limits because it becomes a permanent obligation.
In perpetuity.
Right. All right, any other comments or concerns? Any public comment?
No, Mayor.
I'll entertain a motion here.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2023-027.
Second.
Motion is second, please vote.
Passes 6-0.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2018-11845.
Second.
Motion is second, please vote.
Passes 6-0.
Are you taking off there, Councilman?
If that's all right, I need to absent myself. I apologize. Not that I don't want to hear from Joe, but I've got another board meeting I have to run that I'm running to.
Thank you, Councilman Tenney. We'll persevere here and see if we can finish without you.
Hopefully everyone there will be as nice as everyone here.
All right, we'll move to item E.
Approval of city contract number 2023-044 for the purchase of 3 Grid Smart video detection systems and data collection modules from Clark Transportation Solutions.
Sure. Good afternoon again. So, yeah, this item is for the approval of 3 Grid Smart detection systems. This equipment will replace existing inventory that we use to upgrade 3 intersections on Whipple Street. The equipment was originally intended for Willow Creek Road, some of the stuff we talked about earlier where we're doing those signal improvements. And we borrowed those so that in July, so we could upgrade those in-ground loops to video detection to improve the signal efficiency and to prepare for future pavement maintenance work. So we basically borrowed our own equipment and now we're replacing it. The Grid Smart detection systems, those are those ones I mentioned earlier. We have purchased about 21 of them, so this is just another purchase. But we purchased those through a cooperative existing pricing through a Maricopa Department of Transportation or MCDOT traffic signal equipment contract. And funding is available in fiscal year 23 in the Streets Fund. And we certainly are recommending that you guys approve that contract, 2023-44.
So
I have, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Do these replace the in-surface detection loops?
Yeah, that's exactly
Because
what
I
we
know
did.
over time they have a tendency to fail and give you inaccurate reports or detections, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, this is just the same system we've been putting up all along Willow Creek Road. And we thought that we were going to move quicker with a pavement project on Whipple. So our crews quickly put up 3 new systems on Whipple at Division, Ruth, and Merritt.
Okay.
And so we're just buying them back to use on Willow Creek.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem?
So this is part of our program to improve on our traffic flows.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, any public comment on this?
No, Mayor.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll move to approve city contract number 2023-044.
Second.
Motion is second, please vote.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item F.
Approval of city contract number 2023-054 for the purchase of 150 2022 Club Car Tempo L1 golf carts and 1 Cafe Express beverage cart from Club Car LLC using the Indigo Golf National account.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. I also want to thank Sarah for putting me on the agenda before Chief Holger, because if you guys saw his performance, Dancing for the Stars, it's a tough act to follow, right? I mean it. You guys get a chance, check that video out. So this is replacing the golf carts that we have out at the golf course. They're a little over 5 years old. I'm starting to see some battery failures. With winter coming on, that'll probably be exacerbated a little bit. They've held up pretty good. They've run, the life expectancy for average carts is about 4 years, so we're getting a little bit more out of them than that. These are club cars, which are kind of considered the Cadillac, if you will, of the golf cart industry. Part of the reason that we're able to do that is our purchasing power is really a lot better with our national account with Indigo Golf. If you look at the proposal, you'll see it was a $202,000 savings or deduction by using that national contract, so we're happy for that. These are a lot lighter carts. They're about 80 pounds lighter, so that helps with ground compaction on the turf out there, so they're also good for the turf. We had the fiscal year 22 revenue from the golf cart rentals was $638,000. So you can see individually they're a pretty good return on the investment. Of course, we still have to pay for other things out there, but individually they stack up pretty good. As a part of this contract, the company Club Car is also going to throw in a beverage cart, about a $25,000 value. We do need another beverage cart out there. The price that you see there today is inclusive of a $490,000 credit for turning in the golf carts that we purchased 5 years ago. So pretty good trade-in value on that. And these come with a 5-year warranty. And also, we're increasing the golf fleet from 130 carts to 150 carts. We're really starting to see the increase in golf rounds. We're at about 82,000 rounds this year. A lot of times we're really pressed to have enough carts to go out there, and there's certain times of the year where we're renting outside. For example, for the father and son tournament, since there's almost 600 players that come play just for that, we'll find ourselves renting from an outside firm for extra carts for a month or two during that time. So this 150 carts will help us with that, and with that, I would answer any questions.
Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. Joe, my question, and perhaps this is something that you already have considered, but did we look at the idea of leasing carts going forward instead of purchasing and owning a fleet?
We have. We've looked at that every time, Councilman Montoya, and find that it's better. As you can see from the trade-in value that we get, we're really better off owning them, and we've gone through that study several times.
That is what I assumed, but I just wanted to ask for clarity.
Good question.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Are we going to be building a golf cart barn next?
Actually, no. Too expensive to do, but we do want to put concrete in the bottom of the existing cart barn that will help extend the life of these carts as well. So that's a capital improvement that we have budgeted for, I believe, next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman can tell me.
Yes, this is more of a comment and probably a good comment. I noticed here on the third or fourth paragraph here that it says the revenue from golf cart rentals at Antelope Hills in fiscal year 2022 was $638,262. So essentially what's going to happen is that's basically 1 year of cart rentals to pay for these new ones.
Yeah, well, if you look at it individually, absolutely, it's a good return on the investment. But of course, there's so much more that goes into the golf course, and this is just one of the revenue streams. But absolutely, the carts hold up.
So they're paying for themselves, basically. Thank
And
you.
we're one of the few golf courses in the country that actually is increasing the number of rounds. Almost when we listened to that consultant, they were talking about so many municipal courses that are actually having less rounds played. So I think that's a reflection on how valuable having our two courses out there at Antelope Hills and being able to provide the quality of experience, which includes golf carts, that they're experiencing, and I think that just continues to make that one of our valuable amenities within the city. Any other comments or concerns? Any public comment?
No, Mayor.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2023-054.
Second.
Motion, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item G.
Approval of city contract number 2023-042 with Managing for Results LLC to provide professional services for strategic plan facilitation for the completion of the fire department strategic plan update.
Okay, Mayor and Council, Holger Dura, Fire Chief, and welcome Councilwoman Gantelme. Let's see, let me bring this up. Okay. So while this is an approval of a contract for our Phase 2 consultants, we wanted to take this opportunity to briefly give you an update of where we're at in our strategic planning update. As you recall, we engaged with many of you, the community, our departments and department directors early this summer to work on our organizational identity, mission, and visions, and I'll present that here in just a second. So, but let's kind of give you the context. So we have a strategic plan that was done in 2019 in line with our accreditation efforts. And that plan, while good, needed to be updated for contemporary issues in the community, mainly, for instance, the capital investments that we're looking at making with fire stations. The other thing, when I came into the organization, I really felt it was important for us to look at our organizational identity as a department and revalidate the vision, mission, and values before we engaged in any of these organizational change initiatives, so we had a good roadmap to follow. Obviously, we needed a lot of community input, but the other thing that the current plan lacked was program-based budgeting, which is something we're really trying to integrate into our strategic plan so that there is a defined set of inputs, a defined set of outputs, but more importantly, short, medium, and long-term outcomes or impacts that relate to those programs in terms of the activity that happens in those. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. Let's go first on organizational identity, or phase one, that's now complete. First of all, on the internal stakeholders, those are the firefighters, we had an 89.5% participation rate. That's pretty astounding for an effort like this. And that speaks to, I think, the firefighters' readiness to engage in this work. And in essence, I've boiled it down here into the theme of we're informed by tradition, doing the best with the resources we have, and looking towards the future. Our external stakeholders, which in this case I would consider the department directors and the city manager's office as well, we had about 78% participation from the internal stakeholders here in the city. We had business and stakeholder engagement. Councilman Moore and Mayor Good were at one of those outreach sessions. And we also engaged with our governmental partners such as the Forest Service, CAFMA, and also Lifeline to make sure that we were well-rounded in our approach. And there we learned that we're a great department with dedicated professionals responding to growth. In collective fashion, where are we? Well, it basically means that we were maintaining a Prescott Fire identity that was important in the tradition while becoming a modern, accountable, regional all hazards leader. So this is what we ended up with, and I apologize that this is a little bit small on this PowerPoint slide, but this is also in your handouts. And this is the official new mission, vision, and values. Now you notice that it doesn't say that necessarily. It says our core identity and attitude. And that was part of the contemporary nature. We needed to make sure that it resonated with our firefighters and our 40-hour staff, that they could rally behind it, and also that the community could see us represented in this. So our core identity and attitude is now community first, driven by excellence, courage, grit, and duty. Our shared values and beliefs, I won't read those off. You can see those. Those were resounding across many of our stakeholder sessions, both internal and external. And I don't have any concerns or issues as the fire chief having our organization and myself live by those shared values and beliefs. Our mission, our purpose, the reason why we get out of bed every day is to mitigate the community's risk through service, excellence, and compassion. Now you notice that this is not very wordy, and that's on purpose. We want to make sure that people can remember it, people can associate with it, and it's something that actually is more than just a plaque on a wall. And then finally, where we'd like to go, our vision. It's a community partner that instills pride, supports our people, leads the region, and proactively solves public safety challenges. Notice also in there that we're, for instance, not talking about things that a lot of fire department vision mission statements might have in it, like responding rapidly. And those to me are outputs. Really, we wanted to make sure that we were far more comprehensive in our approach. And I think you've already seen that particularly in our fiscal 23 budget request, that we're looking at a much broader scope in terms of what a fire department does for its community. Looking ahead to phase two, again, we're really now. Yes, sir.
For leading in the fun category.
Yes, absolutely. If you can't have fun at work, it's much more difficult for me to manage that organization, I can tell you that. So turning our focus now over to performance measurements and program management, we were looking for a consultant that could help us really figure out not only how to establish metrics in the fire department that were meaningful and not just window dressing, but also driven down into the program management level. One thing to recall is our fire department is managed across not just by 40-hour staff, but firefighters that have pretty significant programs. For instance, our emergency medical services program is shared between a captain and one of our firefighters, both between the program management and the supplies. And in order to make sure that those programs are achieving their intended outcomes, and I can report to you on an annual basis our effectiveness, we need to make sure that we've got a metric-driven strategic plan. We also needed to make sure that we did a financial impact analysis. Yes, we presented to you a pretty significant capital budget request with the fiscal 23-year budget and looking in the out years about 2 stations, relocating Station 73. And just on August 23rd, we talked about the need to add staff. I want to make sure that as part of this strategic plan, we have well-founded financial analysis as part of this. And finance is going to be actually participating directly with us in this phase 2 to make sure that our financial assumptions are sound and we don't have to come to the dais and wonder if the numbers are right. And then finally, I think we really do need a capital improvement budget that integrates with the city's strategic plan, particularly because of the general fund displacement that I talked about on August 23rd that I'm concerned about. I want to make sure that we have a very responsible way forward to figure out how we can put that capital infrastructure in place. We chose About Managing Results. They are a smaller strategic consulting firm, but their specific niche in the strategic planning space is strategic business planning and performance-based budget measurement. They have done this before, not just with public agencies, but particularly fire and police agencies across the country. Some large customers, for instance, include the city of El Paso, the city of Las Vegas, as well as smaller departments more reflective of the city of Prescott. So I'm very confident that they are the right choice for us to move forward in this. Now, here we go.
How did you
yes,
go
sir.
about identifying this particular consulting firm?
Yes, we did put a request for bids out. It was an informal request for bids because the threshold for the purchase was below $49,000 or $50,000. And we received 3 specific bids. One was actually from our phase 1 strategic consultant. But again, he was extraordinarily effective. If you worked with him, very effective at that phase. But we didn't feel like that really fit our next phase. The other consultant that put in was the accreditation body's technical advising program, the TAP program, and then this firm put in. So those 3 are the ones that we reviewed for this phase of the project.
Thank you.
This is a little bit of a diagram frenzy, and I get that, but I'm hoping that I can at least show you from a vision standpoint where I'm planning to take this entire process, because I don't want these documents to live independently on bookshelves. They all need to integrate. The entire process has to come together. And the strategic plan, to me, in the fire department is really the central component of that. It is the spoke of this, or the hub of this wheel. Without that, we can't operate. But let's start basically with the approval of the fiscal year budget at the top there. Every 6 months, this department is going to be undertaking program appraisals where we measure effectiveness and see where we're at in terms of our spending and our achievements. Those are in part required by accreditation. Accreditation requires them on an annual basis. I believe it's important for us to do a 6-month check-in. And then we go back and update our accreditation performance indicators. Along with that, we would update the strategic plan work plan, which will be associated with the strategic plan, back into the annual program appraisals. And then starting in February of next year, we're going to be in front of you again with annual council updates, formal presentations on our performance, on our strategic plan accomplishment. And the reason why we want to do that in February is obviously not just with the calendar year ending, but also because that's a good tee-off for us to have our budget conversation later on in spring. We would then, based on your feedback, again, update the strategic work plan, incorporate that into our budget messaging and our budget work, and then repeat the cycle all over again. This is a very high-level diagram, obviously. There's a little bit more detail to it, as you can imagine. But this at least gives you an idea of where I'm planning on putting the strategic plan in the overall context of the management of the fire department. This is our timeline. We're looking to kick off on September 26th with an executive retreat. Obviously, the fire department's going to be there, but finance, the city manager's office, and human resources will also be participating in that piece. Then in mid-October, we move to the department workshops that help us develop those operational programs. In early November, we'll look at that financial impact analysis, really sharpening our pencil. And then late November, I plan to come back to you to present the completed plan for you for approval in late November, early December. So that is an update of our strategic planning process. Ready for questions?
Sounds great.
Questions?
Sounds great.
No?
Sounds great.
Thank you for all that work.
Well, as usual, Chief, you've done an exemplary job of laying out your preliminary plan and what steps you intend to take. And over the timeline, it's really helpful for us to understand what your plan is and how you're going to implement it and over what time horizon. So thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, I guess we're ready to entertain a motion, huh?
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2023-042.
Second.
Motion and a second, please vote.
Passes 5-0.
All right, we'll move on to item H then, huh?
Approval of acceptance of a participating agreement between the City of Prescott and the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, Prescott National Forest.
Mayor and Council, Holger Durr, Fire Chief again. So as you probably noticed in the audience, we also have some representatives from the U.S. Forest Service, but let's get into this. So as you know, we do a lot of cooperative fuels treatment work with the Forest Service here in the Prescott Basin. And one big difference that we're using with this approach is those projects usually are pre-planned a year out, very specific to a specific piece of geography. In our work with the Forest Service, we've identified that we can step up our relationship quite a bit and allow our forestry crew to be able to be deployed by the U.S. Forest Service on a grant basis. And there's money under the Infrastructure Act that's come available. But the other thing is I really want to make sure that I highlight here, Marcia, who's back here in the audience, as well as Tony, they have been the ones that have done the yeoman's work on all this and been working on this quite a while. But let's get into this. All right, so first of all, we've been engaged in mitigation projects, obviously, like I mentioned, with the Forest Service for quite a while. The Forest Service staffing, as you know, declines over the course of the year. They also have seasonal workers, but then they also have full-time workers that come back from busy fire seasons and want to take vacation. Well, interestingly enough, that's about the right time for us to do fuels treatment work here in the basin, and then the Forest Service doesn't have quite the staffing depth that they need in order to successfully execute on those projects. So that's partially one of the foundational principles that gave birth to this idea. In addition, our forestry crew is pretty dependent on grant funding, as you know. A large percentage of particularly our operating budget in terms of salaries comes from these kind of participating agreements. And we mentioned this before during the Indian Fire presentation. It's always good to mention this. In the Prescott Basin, in terms of the U.S. Forest Service assessment, we have some of the highest priority fire sheds in the country, and our proactive mitigation obviously is key. And this is a pretty innovative way for us to do that. Most of our forestry crew members are variable hourly employees, and in order to keep them engaged and on the crew, it takes a little bit more than just a paycheck, which is relatively small, obviously, because of their status. But in order for us to give them skill development and some exposure, this agreement also helps us engage them with the overhead and management of the deep talent pool that the Forest Service has. I already mentioned the new federal funding. This is on a pretty tight timeline. As we were preparing, we thought we had a little bit more time. If you approve this, by September 15th, in other words, on Thursday, is when this will be executed and ready to go. So, but we wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity for you to consider this as an agreement. Now, a few things that I think are very important for us to understand here. It formalizes the forestry crew's utilization on an ad hoc basis outside of our city limits. So that's a little bit different. Sure, we've got that before with these protracted agreements, but I can't tell you right now what the work is going to look like in March of next year because it's going to be dependent on U.S. Forest Service needs and our availability. So this is very similar to a mutual aid agreement where U.S. Forest Service would call us saying, are you available? We would look at our resource allocation and then decide whether or not to commit our crew to the project. The agreement in its current form calls for prescribed burning done collaboratively. Now, that is a big threshold for us to talk about. This is obviously the department with the Granite Mountain Hotshots in our past, and one of the issues that came up out of that was active firefighting in terms of seasonal employees. We're not ready to have this conversation with you, and so what we have done is made sure that we put a backstop in. The Forest Service is flexible enough that they're willing to work with us while we work through those issues and still deploy our crews in a non-active firefighting suppression and allow the Forest Service to do the prescribed burning. Obviously, prescribed burning on top of what I just mentioned is also an extremely risky activity, and at this point, we're not going to be doing any active firefighting. If that was something that were to happen, obviously, City Manager Lamar and I would prepare something very very thorough for this council to consider, and we'd be extremely, extremely measured in the way that we approach this. So, how do we mitigate those risks? So I've already issued a formal letter that's part of your council package to Deputy Chief Knapp, who oversees at the strategic level that program, basically issuing a moratorium that is extended from my predecessor for any active firefighting at this point. The U.S. Forest Service will maintain oversight of this program, and our personnel will constantly work under their liability protection and command and control. The risk pool has already been proactively briefed on this. We've talked to them. They're very aware, and they are supportive of this. And this is a statement that I have to really make sure I get out there. It does not migrate the forestry crew to a suppression resource. They are a mitigation prevention resource and will stay as such. And that is really it. Obviously, we're both here to answer any questions that you might have.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, as you know, the Crooks fire is still very fresh in our minds, and it was made us so aware of how we need to keep our mitigation going and working intergovernmentally with our U.S. Forest Service partners. And I just want to commend everyone for working together so wonderfully during the Crooks fire, because, you know, it was a very stressful time coming up on a 20-year anniversary of the Indian fire. So anything we can do to promote this cooperation and collaboration is for the benefit of the region. So thanks to everybody.
Councilwoman Cantelmi.
Yes, of course. Everybody knows that my son is a firefighter also. Will this include some additional training for your guys? Because I know the fires are fought differently. It's become such a science now. Mm-hmm. So do you have the money for that?
So
want to keep them safe.
Yeah, this part actually does help us with training that suppression crew, or the mitigation crew in those skills, and that's exactly what I was referring to. Is it helps us kind of broaden their skill base, which is an enhancement, a job enhancement tool for us for retention, and I think that's really important to consider.
And would you tap into the wildlands crews?
They would be part of the U.S. Forest Service wildland. For instance, the Hot Shots, the Prescott Hot Shots sometimes engage with that. I would say Tony Ballou can probably answer that question a little bit better. But in terms of wildland crews, at the City of Prescott, not directly, would be basically our forestry crew.
Yeah, to me, it's so crucial, the training. I've seen and been to many, many training activities, and it can just mean the difference between life and death.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Chief, the primary reason for this is because the Forest Service is understaffed?
That's a great question. I would say that there are seasonal fluctuations in alignment with our opportunities for mitigation is probably the mismatch. But do you want to maybe speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Good afternoon. My name is Tony Ballou. I'm the Forest, Fire, and Fuels Planner for the Prescott National Forest. And so the question is the capacity, increasing the capacity for the Prescott National Forest. We don't have the resources at the time of year where we do a lot of our prescribed burning. In the fall and in the springtime, our permanent workforce is fairly small for the Prescott. So the increased capacity that the city of Prescott can come and bring and help us prep these hazardous fuels production projects that we have that are primarily in the close proximity to the Prescott city itself.
So without this agreement, you couldn't do prescribed burns?
This tremendously helps us increase our capacity to do prescribed burning. So we can increase the amount of prescribed burns that we could complete in a fiscal year and help train and work alongside and network with the city of Prescott.
So what would be the term of this agreement?
So at this point, it is a year in length and then extends by either party, in essence, agreeing to continue the agreement. And now I believe that there is each year, fiscal year funding gets renewed and reevaluated. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can modify this agreement and how much funding that we can add to it each year. So it's more of a call when needed basis. Currently, it's funded for about $78,000, which is 20 working days to help us with projects. And then the following fiscal year, depending upon budget and need, we can modify it and increase the funding.
So with more funding, if you had substantially more funding, you'd be able to provide your own personnel to deal with the prescribed burns that you would prefer to do?
Yeah, right now with the infrastructure bill, it's not the funding that's the concern, it's the capacity, it's the personnel to increase the amount of hazardous fuel reduction projects. So the funding isn't the issue.
Well, the funding pays for your staff.
Right. The benefit on our side is that it provides us with another stable funding source for the forestry crew. As you mentioned, obviously, this will not take over their entire workload. However, it helps us with these varied inputs to help us fund our own forestry program. But obviously, it also continues the partnership that we have with the U.S. Forest Service here locally, which is kind of the double benefit on each side, in essence.
So because we have permanent firefighters available, and we're providing us support staff for more prescribed burns with our firefighters.
Yeah, so our firefighters, obviously in this case, and obviously then the firefighters, our forestry crew members are variable hourlies. And basically, if we don't have a continued funding source and continued project streams, we in essence have to either temporarily furlough them or let them go, which then decreases our ability to be flexible in the city to continue our other work. So, like I said, the majority of those fuels crew members are funded on a variable hourly level. And so, unless we have that incoming either grant or resource stream as this, we basically then have these fluctuations in our staff ourselves. This helps us stabilize that, and they're available for their current duties in addition to helping the Forest Service. And again, I think the other thing to really emphasize here, this is only if our crew is available. If we can free the resource up, then we would do that on an opportunistic basis. If not, they stay home and work on our projects.
So in essence, if funding is not the problem, it's staffing, but you have the funding, so you channeling the funding to our fire department to be able to support and have enough staff to be able to support your controlled burns on a seasonal basis. Is that how it's going to work?
Well, what we designed this to do was to give our crew the opportunity to have an alternative funding source. We work very closely with Forest Service on a daily basis to establish priority areas within right near the city limits, which is where our next projects are already planned. We're not doing anything for their burning. Proposed right now, we have a 500-acre parcel that we could possibly be completing, and it's mastication and hand thinning. They would be doing all the burning, but it gives our guys or my crew another funding source. It gives them more experience, and we work, like I said, one-on-one. It's all, that project is near Goldwater Lake, so it's in the area where the Crooks Fire could have gone. This will put in not only a fire break, but it's going to reduce and make the forest healthier as well. So we work close together. It's not, what also happens is that they lay their people off and they come work for us for the winter. So we take on some of their employees for the winter, and then they go back to the summer with them. So that's, we get their people when they have to lay them off, and then they leave us in the summertime and go back.
So that way we have continuity of staffing and be able to have probably more experience in training with the people that are doing the work.
Yes, sir. And they, like I said, they come back every year, and they also attend the Wildfire Academy here in Prescott on scholarship to take classes each year to keep staying safe. And they do everything that the suppression guys do on a yearly basis to have all their qualifications as well.
Well, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, you had a question?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think fire breaks are very essential, and I remember 20 years ago, Tony Shaka had been working on a fire break, and we've got one that pretty much surrounds the southwest part of town. I look at it, starts from what I can see at Thumb Butte and heads south around town, but it's very important that we maintain that. It's amazing how fast things can grow back, and we maintain it and extend it to new areas so that we're fully protected. And thank you for getting the funding to do that.
Thank you. All of our projects, like I said, are prioritized on that side of town where there's potential for a horrible issue to occur.
Okay, any other questions or concerns? Public comment?
No, Mayor.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve acceptance of the participating agreement.
Second.
Have a motion and second, please vote.
Passes 5-0.
All right, we're down to item I.
Thanks, guys.
All right, everybody get ready. It's a long one.
No, it's not.
Approval of multiple items related to the runway 3L21R lighting and signage and precision approach path indicator PAPI projects at Prescott Regional Airport as follows. Number 1, city contract number 2023-046 with Rural Electric, Inc. to perform construction services. Number 2, city contract number 2019-069A37, an amendment to city contract number 2019-069 with Dibble for construction management services. Number 3, additional grant funding in the amount of $17,550 from ADOT on grant E2S1L01D. Number 4, the city's 10% share of $1,755 associated with the increase from grant E2S1L01D. And number 5, night work.
Good job.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So Robin
Good
Sabata,
morning.
Airport Director, and again, welcome, Connie.
Thank you.
Councilwoman can tell me. So a lot of people don't realize that we actually do have another runway up here since we talk about the main commercial service runway so much. You can see on the diagram up here, we do have a parallel general aviation runway and we do have a crosswind runway. So this project actually applies to this general aviation runway. Just FYI, that runway is only used from 6 a.m. in the morning until 10 p.m. at night. It is closed nightly. This particular project, we started back with ADOT back in 2017, and this is an example of how we go out for design, we set it on the shelf, and then when ADOT gets a little extra money, we get a little extra money, so it's kind of nice. This project is a 90-10 grant, 90% paid for by state funds, 10% by city funds. The state is a little different than the FAA, so on this project, they issued the grants sort of up front, and then when you get your bids back, if they differentiate, then what we have to do is we have to sort of massage those. So this is 2 projects in one. It is a set of lighting and signage replacements for that general aviation parallel runway, and it's also a visual piece of instrumentation referred to as a PAPI. That's a precision approach path indicator. So as you approach the runways on each end, the runway on each end, what happens is you see a series of lights, 4 lights. If you're too high, you see all white. If you're too low, well, you're dead. But anyway, if you're too low, then you see all reds. And but, red always is not good. So you want to lift yourself up. So it's an approach.
Towards the lights.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So this particular project, what we did is, and Dwayne is here with Dibble, and thank you for all your support on this because this has really gone on for quite a while. We put the 2 projects together into one project. One came in above the bid, one came in below the bid. We talked to ADOT, and ADOT decided to give us a change order for above the bid on the PAPIs because it came over engineering estimate. And then they said at the end of the project, we have to return to them money for the other grant that we had already received. So it ends up being still a 90-10 match. And so what you've got here are 5 components. The first one is the actual, the first one is the city contract with Rural Electric. There were 2 bidders on this double project bid. One was Rural, and then the other one was Technology Construction, and Rural bested the other entity by $200,000 on the bid. So Rural is going to be awarded the bid. Just so you know, it was about $100,000 over engineer's estimate because As everything else we've seen, things are coming in, but fortunately, ADOT was willing to come in and give us that additional funding, and we're always appreciative of their support. So in addition, the second item is that Dibble is being brought on for construction management services. This is for construction management and inspection services. Also, 2 subs are working under Dibble, CR Engineer, that's electrical support services, and then ETC, which is quality assurance testing, is also coming on board. This is very common that we have a specialized support system for electrical. And then the next one is additional grant funding from ADOT to receive that grant and accept it. Number 4 is the city's 10% share to match the additional funding. And then ultimately, the approval of night work is being considered here. The neat part of this particular project is, our lighting and signing was antiquated. It's really nice to see that it's being brought up to speed. After this, it takes it up to LED lighting. After this, the only remaining incandescent area on the airport is one remaining taxiway. So we've converted a lot of our airfield lighting for efficiency over to the LED lighting, which is really an advancement and helps us with long-term electrical costs and also reduces maintenance costs on the airfield. So overall, it's a really good situation, and we're just happy to keep receiving their funds and keep upgrading the airfield.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sabata, and thank you for hanging in here for this long evening.
Yeah.
Questions, Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I would just like to emphasize that, once again, safety is job one for us out at the airport, and it's continuous. And I just want to thank Dr. Sabata for all her efforts. Nobody wants to see antiquated airfield equipment at their airport. And I think this is wonderful, and it shows the support of the FAA that wants to continuously maintain the success of our airport.
Any more questions or concerns? Any public comment?
No, Mayor.
I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2023-046.
Second.
Motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 5-0.
Mayor, I move to approve city contract number 2019-069A37.
Second.
Motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 5-0.
Mayor, I move to approve receipt of an additional $17,550 in ADOT grant E2S1L01D 4.
No, not the 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's running together.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 5-0.
Mayor, I move to approve the city's 10% match on the increased grant amount.
Second.
All right, motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 5-0.
And last but not least, I move to approve the night work.
Second.
Motion is second. Please vote.
Passes 5-0.
Night moves, I guess.
Night moves.
Well, thank you very much. We've concluded our agenda, and I'll close this city council meeting with the following quote. Resolved to be tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, and tolerant of the weak and the wrong. For some time in life, you will be or have been all of these. From George Washington Carver.
Aww.
Isn't that great? Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.